This is the fifth module in the Research and Developmental Psychology lecture, and this is going to be the focus on developmental research and attachment. So let's have a quick preview. The research designs that we have reviewed in the previous two modules will now be applied to the topic area of attachment. We'll be reviewing the basics of attachment and then showing how the various developmental designs have been used to study the topic. You will also see this being used in your assignment and all of the articles associated with it. When we talk about attachment, we're talking about the strong affectional tie that binds a person to an intimate companion. The first attachment typically occurs around 6 or 7 months of age. Throughout the lifespan, the objects of our attachments are special, irreplaceable people with whom we're motivated to stay close to and from whom we derive a sense of security. You may get a sense that this is typically a mother or a father or significant caregiver is the first person we attach to. Now, infants are biologically predisposed to form attachments. And there is what we call a sensitive period for this attachment in the first 3 years of life. Whether an attachment forms and how secure it will be is influenced by ongoing interactions with the infant and the caregiver, and by the ability of each partner to respond to the other's signals. So, attachment requires some time, but the good news is that most people are able to do this without any sort of training whatsoever. There is one big way of measuring attachment, and that is through something called the strange situation test that was created by Mary Ainsworth. And the strange situation test is a technique for measuring the quality of an attachment. A series of 8 episodes that gradually escalate amount of stress the infants experience as they react to the approaches of adult strangers and departures and returns of the caregiver. So for instance, the very first one would be having mom come into a room that has some toys. They sit down, they play together a little while, and then mom gets up to leave the room and leaving the child behind. You can only imagine what the impact of this would be on the child. Most of the time, the children that are used in the strange situation test are around 1 year of age. Now, this is considered the gold standard of attachment studying. However, there are other surveys and interviews that have been developed to measure attachment in children, adolescents, and even adults. So you can see that there are various interviews, various surveys about attachments, not only to parents, but also to friends and peers, to schools, and to neighborhoods. So attachment is a key concept anytime we talk about development, and a lot of the impact and how we react to others goes back to our initial attachments. Big fan of attachments. Now, there are 4 main types of attachments, and they have various developmental outcomes. The secure attachment occurs in roughly 65 to 70% of 1-year-olds. This is good news because this is the best type of attachment to have. These children tend to be well-adjusted, self-confident, do well in school, are accepted by their peer groups, have close friends in childhood and adolescence. It also has very positive implications for social, emotional, and intellectual development. So secure attachment is where it is. That's where you want to be. A different type of attachment is resistant attachment, and resistant attachment you see in about 10% of 1-year-olds. Another type is called avoidant attachment, and this is in about 15% of 1-year-olds. And the final category is disorganized, disoriented attachment, and this is in 5 to 10% of 1-year-olds. The disorganized and disoriented attachment is probably the least, it's the one you don't want. Basically, about 80% of the infants who have the disorganized, disoriented attachment have been physically abused or maltreated. Oftentimes, and the reason I haven't given you more in-depth definitions of resistant, avoidant, and disorganized, disoriented attachments is that they're often combined into a kind of bigger category called insecure attachment. And those who have insecure attachments tend to have very negative outcomes. And you can see this in the later outcomes. Securely attached children, which I've already kind of reviewed, cognitively and socially competent, and expect positive reactions. And that gets back at how the attachment formed in the very first place that I talked about earlier. If you have positive ongoing interactions between a child and the caregiver, a secure attachment is very likely to result. Insecurely attached children, children who do not see these sort of good interactions, are likely to experience poor peer relations and fewer closer friendships. They're likely to display more deviant behaviors and other psychopathological symptoms throughout childhood and adolescence. You can also see them be more withdrawn and dependent and fearful, and even less competent. The ability to form attachments really depends on the infant's temperament, their level of cognitive development, and knowledge of the surrounding world. Also, parents give contact comfort, which is very helpful in having a more secure attachment. Now, these attachment patterns can last throughout adolescence, so they are something that's quite significant and something of note. So, there are various research examples that you're going to see, and I've talked about in the last few modules here. And those will be ones that use meta-analysis, longitudinal, cross-sectional, sequential, or combined designs. Combined means they maybe use more than one. Maybe they have a longitudinal portion of their study and they have a cross-sectional portion of their study. Okay. So we've now reviewed the experimental methods utilized by developmental psychologists to discover more about human development, including a special focus on the topic of attachment. I want you to use these 5 modules and the provided PowerPoint slides to answer your homework assignments.